Welcome to another deep dive. You know we love to get into the weeds about a topic, and that's what we're going to be doing today with human-centric organizations in the digital world.
Sounds very timely.
Yeah, and this one is especially interesting because we're taking our cues from a podcast outline from Haptic R&D Consulting.
Oh, cool.
And they're a firm that helps companies basically hold on to that human touch as they're integrating digital solutions into their businesses.
Okay.
You know, one of the things that really kind of jumped out at me was the idea that AI can actually help make workplaces more human.
Right. Not less.
Yeah, so that's something that I think we should definitely explore today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're hitting on something that's really crucial there.
So the outline kicks off by, talking about this digital dilemma everyone's facing, right?
Right.
How do you use technology without losing that essential human element?
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how does this whole haptic idea play into all of this? Like, even the name itself, it seems to suggest this need for a sense of touch, even when we're talking about a digital environment.
Yeah, it's funny because haptic literally does relate to the sense of touch. So
Right.
it's a really powerful analogy when we're talking about this stuff because it really brings home the need for organizations to kind of be sensitive and responsive to their employees' needs and experiences, even as more and more work is happening digitally.
Right.
It's like, imagine trying to navigate like a physical world, but you couldn't touch anything. It would be so hard, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Companies really need to develop that same kind of sensitivity in the digital realm.
Okay, so it's about being really attuned to the human experience, even when most interactions are happening through screens and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So the outline mentions some specific tools like AI,
Yeah.
the Internet of Things, and data analytics. But I'm going to be honest, when I hear those, I don't immediately think, oh, those are human-centric.
Okay, I see your point.
So how can those kinds of tools actually help make work more human?
Yeah, well, it really comes down to how we use them,
Right?
For example, with AI, instead of thinking of it as like a replacement for human workers, think of it more like an assistant. Imagine if you had an AI that could analyze your meeting notes and then generate follow-up tasks from that. That would free you up to do more strategic thinking and be more creative in solving problems.
Interesting.
So that's really AI boosting human potential, not replacing it.
Okay, so AI is a collaborator, not a competitor.
Exactly.
I like that. What about the Internet of Things then? How does that fit into this whole model?
So think about IoT sensors in a workplace. They can monitor things like air quality or lighting, even noise levels.
Wow.
And that helps make sure the environment is healthy and comfortable for everyone. And then by gathering data on all these factors, companies can make adjustments that directly improve people's well-being and then, in turn, productivity.
That's a side of IoT I hadn't really thought about.
Yeah, it's kind of like a silent partner,
Right.
Just making sure the physical workspace is really in tune with people's needs.
I like that. So then what about data analytics? Because I could see that feeling kind of intrusive,
Yeah.
especially when it's applied to employees.
Yeah, there's a fine line there for sure. But think of it this way. Data analytics can be used to find patterns in employee behavior and preferences.
Okay.
And then you can use that information to develop more personalized training programs or maybe offer more flexible work arrangements.
Right.
Or even tailor benefit packages, It's all about understanding and responding to individual needs on a deeper level.
So it's not just about like crunching numbers. It's about using those insights to create a more customized and supportive work experience.
Exactly.
Which brings us to Haptic R&D Consulting and their approach. They talk about things like business audits and technology transfer. What does that actually look like in practice?
So it's a pretty sophisticated approach, actually. Instead of having this one-size-fits-all solution, they start with a really comprehensive business audit to figure out what the organization's unique needs and goals are. And then they use their expertise in technology transfer to kind of create a roadmap for a more human-centric workplace.
So for people who maybe haven't heard that term before, technology transfer basically means taking these cutting-edge technologies and figuring out how to apply them to solve real-world problems.
Yeah, exactly.
But in a practical way.
Right. And in this case, the problem they're solving is how to use technology to build a workplace that puts human well-being first, diversity and inclusion, too.
Okay, so they're not just throwing tech at the problem. They're being very deliberate about it, finding the right solutions that actually fit the company's culture and values.
Exactly.
This is all really impressive. But I'm thinking about our listeners right now.
Mm-hmm.
Someone might be hearing all this and thinking, okay, this sounds great in theory, but where do I even start?
Right.
What advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's the key question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I think the very first step is to take a hard look at your current organizational culture
Okay.
and be realistic about it, you
All right.
know? What are the company's core values? How are employees treated? Is there a culture of open communication and collaboration?
But isn't there a risk of companies kind of being too self-congratulatory during that self-assessment?
Oh, for sure.
Like, how do you make sure they're being honest with themselves?
Well, that's where gathering data comes in.
Okay.
Doing things like anonymous employee surveys, confidential interviews, focus groups.
Mm.
You really want to get an unfiltered view of what's actually going on in the workplace.
So you're saying even qualitative data like that can be a powerful tool for making change?
Absolutely. And once you have a clear picture of where you're starting from, then you can start figuring out how to use technology to make things better for your employees.
So,
For example, if your employees are feeling disconnected, maybe a social intranet platform could help foster a stronger sense of community.
yeah, that's a really good concrete example that makes a lot of sense to me.
Right. And if they're bogged down by tons of administrative tasks, maybe you could explore some AI-powered solutions to automate those processes so people have more time to focus on more meaningful work.
I see what you mean. So it's not about tech versus humans.
Right.
It's about finding that sweet spot where tech supports people and creates a more empowering work environment.
Exactly.
So what I'm really curious about now is, are there tangible benefits to this approach?
Mm-hmm.
Does being human-centric actually translate into business success?
Well, the research seems to suggest that it does.
Okay.
For example, the source actually highlights a study that found that companies with strong empathy cultures had 20% higher employee retention rates compared to those that didn't.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant difference.
So there's a clear link to talent acquisition and retention, but what about the bottom line? Does this impact profitability at all?
Yeah, that's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
When employees feel valued and supported, their engagement and their productivity naturally increase, so they're more likely to go the extra mile, which then leads to greater innovation, better customer service, and ultimately higher profits.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I'm also guessing there are some challenges involved in making these kinds of changes. I mean, change is hard, right? Especially in really established company cultures.
You're absolutely right. And the source doesn't shy away from the potential pitfalls.
Okay.
Like one of the biggest hurdles is resistance to change.
Yeah.
People are creatures of habit, and they can be hesitant to embrace new ways of working, even if those new ways are ultimately going to be beneficial.
Yeah, I can definitely see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you overcome that resistance then?
Well, clear communication and transparency are key.
Okay.
You have to really clearly articulate the why behind the changes you're making.
Right.
Help employees understand how these changes will actually benefit them personally and how they fit into the company's overall goals. It's about bringing people along on the journey.
Yeah.
Not just imposing change from the top down.
So make sure everyone feels like they're part of the process, not just subject to it.
Exactly.
But even with the best communication, I imagine there's still a risk of companies focusing too much on short-term gains and neglecting the long-term cultural investment.
Yeah, that's another really important point. It's tempting to go for the quick wins and the immediate results, but building a truly human-centric culture is kind of like cultivating a garden.
Okay.
It takes time, consistent effort, and a willingness to adapt along the way.
I love that analogy. So we've talked about the challenges, but I want to end this section on a more optimistic note.
Okay.
What are some of the most exciting opportunities that you see for companies that are embracing this human-centric model? What does the future hold?
Well, I think the opportunities are truly vast.
Okay.
We're already seeing a shift toward more flexible and personalized work arrangements,
Right.
so people can achieve a better work-life balance.
Yeah.
And the source actually points to some exciting advancements that are on the horizon,
Right.
like the rise of virtual and augmented reality,
It's interesting.
and not just for training, but for real-time collaboration on complex projects, regardless of where people are located.
So even as technology becomes more sophisticated, the emphasis on human connection is still there.
Exactly.
So in a world where AI can automate so much, what is it that's going to set humans apart?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? As we go deeper into this digital era, I think we're going to see a growing emphasis on those uniquely human skills.
Like what?
Things like creativity,
Yeah.
critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and complex problem solving,
Mm.
and the ability to build strong relationships and inspire others. Those things are going to be really valuable.
So it's not about humans competing with technology.
Right.
It's about understanding how to collaborate with it effectively and
Exactly.
leveraging our strengths alongside its capabilities. So the outline predicts that emerging technologies are going to become even more deeply integrated into the workplace. But how do we make sure that integration prioritizes human well-being and empowerment?
Well, the key is designing and implementing those technologies with a human-centric approach from the very beginning.
Okay.
Like, imagine a world where AI assistants can help manage your workload, prioritize your tasks,
Right.
even draft emails for you.
Wow.
So you have more time and energy to focus on the stuff that really requires your creative input.
Interesting.
Virtual and augmented reality could also help facilitate these really immersive training experiences and allow for real-time collaboration on these complex projects that maybe span across different countries.
Those are some really compelling examples.
Yeah.
It sounds like if we do this thoughtfully, technology could really liberate us from the mundane tasks and free us up to focus on the things that actually require our human ingenuity.
Exactly.
But I can't help but wonder about the potential downsides.
Yeah.
Are there risks that we need to be aware of as we embrace these advancements?
You bring up a very important point. I think maybe the most significant risk is becoming overly reliant on technology to the point where we start to lose our own ability to think critically, solve problems independently, and connect with others in a meaningful way.
Right.
It's a delicate balance.
Yeah, it's like those cautionary tales in science fiction, where humanity becomes so dependent on machines that we lose our essential humanness.
Exactly. We need to be really mindful of that slippery slope.
Right.
The key is to harness the power of technology without giving up our own autonomy. We have to retain our capacity for critical thinking, problem solving, and genuine human connection. It's not just about the technology itself, it's about the values that we embed in it.
Right.
And the choices we make about how we're going to use it.
It's reassuring to hear that even as we explore all these advancements, the focus is still on preserving and enhancing our human experience.
Absolutely.
This has been a really insightful conversation so far.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a lot more optimistic about the future of work.
Me too. It's a really exciting time to be at the forefront of this evolution and see firsthand how technology can be a force for good.
Yeah. Before we move on, though, I'm curious, what is Haptic R&D Consulting's overall message? What's the call to action for listeners?
Well, their message is really clear. Let's work together to create organizations that not only harness the power of technology, but also nurture the human spirit.
I like that.
They're inviting us to join them on this journey towards a future where empathy and innovation go hand in hand.
That's a powerful call to action, and it really resonates with everything we've been talking about today.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up this section, is there anything else from the outline that you think we should highlight?
Well, I think it's really important to emphasize the importance of lifelong learning.
Okay.
As technology keeps evolving at this breakneck pace, we all need to be committed to constantly updating our skills and our knowledge. It's not enough to just learn new technologies.
Right.
We also have to cultivate those uniquely human skills that will allow us to adapt and thrive in a world that's constantly changing thanks to technology.
So it's about embracing a growth mindset, being open to new experiences, and always challenging ourselves to learn and evolve.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that learning is not a destination, it's a continuous journey.
Right, and the source actually highlights a pretty compelling statistic.
What's that?
They say by 2025, almost 50% of all employers are going to need significant reskilling and upskilling
Wow.
to stay competitive in the job market.
That's a huge chunk of the workforce.
Yeah, it really underscores how urgent it is to embrace this idea of lifelong learning.
But it's not just about acquiring new technical skills, right?
No, not at all.
It's about those human skills, too.
Exactly. The skills that are going to be most in demand are the ones that are uniquely human. Things like creativity, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, the ability to solve complex problems. Those skills are essential for navigating all the ambiguity out there, building relationships, and leading effectively in a world where things are changing so rapidly.
So even as technology advances, it's our human qualities that are ultimately going to determine our success.
I think that's a really great way to put it.
And that brings us to a final thought-provoking question for our listeners.
Okay.
As we venture further into this digital age, what unique human skills and qualities do you think will become even more valuable And how can you as an individual cultivate those skills so you can not only survive but thrive
Yeah.
in this constantly evolving world?
That's a great question to leave everyone with.
It reminds us that even in a digital world, human ingenuity, empathy, and adaptability are still our greatest assets.
Couldn't agree more. It really does make you think, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And it's a great segue into this next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Because we've been talking about, these human-centric organizations and the skills that are going to matter most.
Right.
But we haven't really touched on what that actually looks like in practice.
Right. Well, the source material actually gives us some pretty concrete examples.
Okay.
One thing they emphasize is the importance of creating a culture of feedback and recognition, where employees feel like their contributions are valued and appreciated.
Yeah. I mean, that's important in any workplace, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it becomes even more crucial in a digital world where people might be working remotely or feeling disconnected.
Right. So how do you do that? How do you create that kind of culture, especially when you're not always face to face?
Well, technology can actually play a really important role here,
Okay.
There are all sorts of tools and platforms that can help facilitate regular feedback and recognition.
Like what?
Well, for example, some companies are using pulse surveys.
Pulse surveys.
Yeah, basically these short, frequent surveys that allow employees to give quick, anonymous feedback on a variety of topics.
Interesting.
And then that data can be used to identify areas where things are going well and areas where improvement is needed.
So it's kind of like taking the temperature of the workplace on a regular basis.
Exactly. And then there are platforms that allow for peer-to-peer recognition, where colleagues can give each other shout-outs for a job well done or acknowledge each other's contributions to a project.
Yeah, those are great because it's not just coming from the top down.
Right, exactly. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels empowered to recognize and appreciate each other.
That makes a lot of sense.
And then another really important aspect of building a human-centric organization is fostering a sense of community.
Right, because you don't want people to feel isolated, especially if they're working remotely.
Exactly, and technology can also be a really powerful tool for building community.
Okay, how so?
Well, for example, some companies are using online platforms to create virtual communities of practice.
Communities of practice.
Yeah, basically, these are groups of people who share a common interest or expertise, and they can connect online to share knowledge resources and support each other.
Oh, that's cool. So it's kind of like a virtual water cooler.
Exactly, and it can be a really great way for people to stay connected, learn from each other, and build relationships, even if they're not physically in the same location.
That's really interesting.
And then another thing that companies doing is using technology to facilitate more social interaction among employees.
Okay, like virtual happy hours or something?
Yeah, exactly. Or online team building activities, or even just creating opportunities for people to connect and chat informally.
So it's about being intentional about creating those opportunities for connection, even in a digital space.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, humans are social creatures,
Right.
We need to feel connected to others, and technology can help us do that in new and innovative ways.
This is all starting to paint a really clear picture of what a human-centric organization can look like.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering about the role of leadership in all of this, How do leaders create the conditions for this kind of culture to thrive?
Well, that's a really important question, and the source material actually dedicates a whole section to leadership. They argue that leaders need to model the behaviors they want to see in their employees.
So lead by example.
Exactly. If you want your employees to be empathetic and compassionate, you need to be empathetic and compassionate as a leader.
That makes sense.
And if you want them to prioritize work-life balance, you need to prioritize work-life balance yourself.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of leaders struggle with.
Oh, absolutely. It's not easy, but it's essential.
Uh-huh.
Because employees take their cues from their leaders.
Right.
If they see their leaders working around the clock and never taking a break, they're going to feel like they have to do the same.
Yeah, that's a recipe for burnout.
Exactly.
So leaders really need to set the tone for the entire organization.
Right. They need to create a culture where people feel supported, valued, and empowered to bring their whole selves to work.
And that's how you create a truly human-centric organization.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a fascinating discussion so far.
Yeah, it has.
But I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the future of work? As technology continues to evolve at this rapid pace, what do you think the workplace of the future is going to look like?
That's a great question, and it's one that a lot of people are grappling with right now.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that the workplace of the future is going to be very different from the workplace of today.
Okay.
We're already seeing a lot of changes happening with the rise of remote work, the gig economy, and automation. And these trends are only going to accelerate in the years to come.
So what does that mean for employees?
Well, it means that they're going to need to be adaptable and resilient.
Okay.
They're going to need to be comfortable with change and uncertainty,
Hmm.
and they're going to need to continuously learn and upskill throughout their careers.
So lifelong learning is going to be more important than ever.
Absolutely. It's no longer enough to get a degree and then coast on that for the rest of your career.
Right. You got to stay ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And the good news is that there are more opportunities than ever to learn and grow. Well, there are online courses, boot camps, certifications, you name it. The key is to be proactive and take ownership of your own development.
So it's about investing in yourself.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, your career is your responsibility.
I think that's a really important point.
And then another thing that employees are going to need to focus on is building their network.
Okay.
Relationships are going to be more important than ever in the workplace of the future.
Why is that?
Well, because as work becomes more decentralized and remote, it's going to be harder to build relationships organically.
Right.
So you're going to need to be intentional about networking and connecting with people.
So attend industry events, join online communities, things like that.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to reach out to people and ask for advice or mentorship.
So it's about being proactive and building those relationships.
Right. Because in the workplace of the future, your network is going to be your net worth.
I love that analogy. Well, this has been a really thought-provoking discussion about the future of work. But I want to shift gears a bit now.
Okay.
And talk about some of the specific technologies that are shaping the workplace.
Sounds good.
The outline mentions a few that I think are particularly interesting.
Like what?
Like artificial intelligence.
Right.
Virtual and augmented reality and blockchain.
Those are definitely some of the biggest trends right now.
Yeah, so let's start with AI. What are some of the ways that AI is being used in the workplace today?
Well, one of the most common applications of AI is in automation.
Okay.
Using AI to automate tasks that are repetitive or rule-based.
Like what?
Like data entry or customer service or scheduling.
So freeing up humans to focus on more strategic work.
Exactly. And AI is also being used to personalize experiences.
Okay. How so?
Well, for example, companies are using AI to personalize product recommendations or marketing messages.
Right.
Or to tailor learning experiences to individual employees' needs.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then another area where AI is having a big impact is in decision making. Using AI to analyze large data sets and identify patterns and trends that humans might miss.
So basically helping humans make better decisions.
Exactly. And AI can also be used to improve efficiency and productivity.
How so?
Well, for example, companies are using AI to optimize supply chains or to route deliveries more efficiently.
So saving time and money.
Exactly.
This is really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it is. And AI is still a relatively new technology.
Right.
So we're only just beginning to scratch the surface of its potential.
I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Me too.
So what about virtual and augmented reality? How are those technologies being used in the workplace?
Well, one of the most common applications of VR and AR is in training.
Okay.
Using these technologies to create immersive simulations that allow employees to practice real-world scenarios in a safe and controlled environment.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, for example, companies are using VR to train employees on how to operate machinery or to handle customer service interactions. And AR is being used to provide employees with real-time information and guidance while they're working.
Like what?
Like imagine a technician who's wearing an AR headset.
Okay.
And they can see step-by-step instructions overlaid on the equipment they're repairing.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And VR and AR are also being used to enhance collaboration.
How so?
Well, they allow people to connect and interact with each other in a virtual environment, regardless of their physical location.
So this is kind of like a virtual meeting room?
Exactly. And it can be a really great way to bring together teams that are distributed across the globe.
It makes a lot of sense.
And VR and AR are also being used to create more engaging and immersive customer experiences.
Okay, like what?
Well, for example, companies are using VR to create virtual showrooms or to give customers a 360-degree view of products.
Interesting.
And AR is being used to overlay product information or reviews on top of real-world objects.
So basically bringing the online world into the offline world.
Exactly.
This is all really cool stuff.
Yeah, it is. And like AI, VR, and AR are still relatively new technologies. So we're only just beginning to explore their potential.
I'm really excited to see how these technologies continue to evolve and shape the workplace of the future.
Me too.
So what about blockchain? That's one that I'm still trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah, blockchain is a bit more complex than we're talking about.
Okay.
But it has the potential to really revolutionize the way we work.
How so?
Well, blockchain is a distributed ledger technology.
A distributed ledger.
Yeah, basically, it's a way of recording transactions and tracking assets in a secure and transparent way. And because it's decentralized, there's no single point of failure or control.
Interesting.
Yeah, so one of the ways that blockchain is being used in the workplace is to streamline supply chains.
Okay. How so?
Well, blockchain can be used to track goods as they move through the supply chain, from the point of origin all the way to the point of consumption.
So everyone involved can see where the goods are at any given time.
Exactly, and that can help to improve efficiency, reduce costs, and prevent fraud.
That makes a lot of sense.
And blockchain is also being used to manage identities and credentials.
Okay.
So, for example, employees could use blockchain to store their resumes, certifications, other credentials.
Right.
And then they could easily share those credentials with potential employers.
Interesting.
Yeah, and blockchain is also being used to facilitate payments and contracts. So, for example, companies could use blockchain to pay freelancers or to automate contract negotiations.
So it's basically a way to make transactions more efficient and secure.
Exactly.
This is all really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it is. And like AI, VR, and AR blockchain is still a relatively new technology.
Right.
So we're only just beginning to explore its potential.
Well, this has been a really enlightening conversation about the technologies that are shaping the workplace.
It has.
But I think it's important to remember that technology is just a tool.
Right.
It's up to us humans to decide how we're going to use it.
Exactly. Technology can be a force for good or for bad. It all depends on the choices we make.
So it's important to be mindful of the potential impact of technology.
Absolutely. And to use it in a way that benefits humanity as a whole.
I think that's a really important message to end on.
I agree.
So we've talked about AI, VR, AR blockchain, all this cool technology.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, and it's exciting, but it's also kind of daunting, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, where does it all lead? What does it mean for the future of work?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And I don't think anyone has all the answers.
Right.
But I do think the source material offers some valuable insights.
Okay, like what?
Well, one of the key takeaways for me was that the future of work is not about humans versus machines.
Right.
It's about humans and machines working together.
So collaboration, not competition.
Exactly. And the key is to figure out how to leverage the strengths of both.
Right, because humans and machines are good at different things.
Exactly. Like machines are great at processing large amounts of data.
Automating tasks and working 24/7.
Right, but they lack things like creativity, empathy, and critical thinking.
Exactly. Those are the things that make us human.
So the future of work is about finding the right balance between human skills and machine capabilities.
Exactly. And I think the companies that are going to be most successful are the ones that figure out how to do that effectively.
That makes a lot of sense. So what are some practical things that companies can do to prepare for this future of work?
Well, first and foremost, I think they need to invest in their people.
Okay.
Provide them with the training and development they need to stay ahead of the curve.
So upskilling and reskilling.
Exactly. Because the skills that are in demand today might not be the skills that are in demand tomorrow.
Right.
And companies also need to create a culture of continuous learning.
Okay.
Where employees are encouraged to experiment and innovate and to constantly be learning new things.
So it's about fostering a growth mindset.
Exactly. And I think companies also need to rethink the way they structure work.
You know, move away from traditional hierarchical structures and create more flexible and agile teams.
So empowering employees to take ownership and be more autonomous.
Exactly. Because in the future of work, the most successful companies are going to be the ones that can adapt quickly to change.
And that requires having a workforce that's empowered and engaged.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive into the future of work.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From the technologies that are shaping the workplace to the skills that are going to be most in demand.
And the importance of creating a human-centric culture.
Exactly. And I think the key takeaway is that the future of work is not something to be feared.
Right.
It's something to be embraced because it's an opportunity to create a better world of work.
A world where technology empowers us to do our best work and to live more fulfilling lives.
I love that. And I think that's a perfect note to end on.
I agree.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the future of work.
It's been a pleasure.
And we hope you'll join us again next time for another insightful conversation.